The road that led to Emily's childhood. Home was no longer a road at all, just a cracked path, swallowed by weeds, choked by vines, and forgotten by time. Her suitcase rattled behind her as she walked, its wheels snagging on roots and stones. She had left this place 2 decades ago, a young girl determined to escape the shadows of a past she didn't understand. Now she was back, a nurse hardened by long hospital nights, carrying not only her belongings but also unanswered questions. The house appeared before her like a ghost. The walls, once white and full of light, were now gray and broken, eaten away by mold. The wooden shutters hung crookedly, and the roof sagged beneath years of storms. Emily stood still, staring, memories rising like dust motes in her mind. Her mother's soft humming, the smell of soup on the stove, the warmth of childhood she had never found again. But all of it was gone, and in its place was silence. She hesitated before stepping inside. The floor groaned under her weight, echoing like a voice. Dust swirled in the air, and the faint scent of decay clung to her nostrils. Emily set down her suitcase, her hand trembling as she touched the wall. Suddenly, she heard it, soft, distant and unmistakable, a voice whispering her name. Emily. Her heart stopped. She spun around, but no one was there. The sound seemed to come from deeper within the house. Against her better judgment, she followed it, her heels clicking softly on the old floorboards. Each room she entered was emptier than the last, stripped of furniture, stripped of life, except for the echoes of her memories. Then, in the back of the house, she found a locked door. She remembered this door. Her mother had always told her never to enter, and as a child she obeyed. Now she could no longer ignore it. The lock was rusted and weak. With a firm push, it broke. Inside was a small hidden room. The air was thick and stale, untouched for decades. A wooden box sat in the center of the floor, covered in dust. Emily knelt down, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside were photographs, black and white, faded, edges curling with age. Her mother was in them, but not alone. She stood with strangers Emily had never seen before, all dressed in white coats like doctors or nurses. Beneath the photos was a letter yellowed with time. Emily unfolded it carefully. The words were scrawled in her mother's handwriting. If you are reading this, it means the past has found you. This house was not only our home. It was a place of healing, but also of secrets. Not everyone who entered here was meant to leave. Forgive me, Emily, one day you will understand why. Emily's hands shook. She looked back at the photographs, her mother smiling, standing beside pale-faced patients who looked more like prisoners than people. Her mind raced. Had her mother been part of something terrible? An experiment? A hidden hospital that no one spoke of? The whisper came again, louder this time. Emily. She dropped the letter and backed away. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift, growing darker, thicker, as if the house itself was alive. Her heart pounded as the air grew cold, and she felt eyes watching her from every direction. Emily fled, suitcase in hand, slamming the door behind her. She stumbled into the daylight, gasping for breath. The house loomed over her, silent but knowing. She realized she had not come home to find comfort. She had come home to uncover the truth, and now the truth would never let her go. Emily staggered down the overgrown path, her suitcase rattling against stones, her breath sharp and uneven. The daylight was slipping, melting into dusk, and the shadows of the trees stretched long and sinister across the ground. Every step she took away from the house felt heavier, as though invisible threads were pulling her back. She reached the old road, intending to call a taxi from the village. But when she pulled out her phone, there was no signal. She lifted it high, walked a few steps, even stood on a rock, but the screen remained blank, dead. She swallowed her fear. The nearest village was at least a mile away, and night was closing in. Behind her, the house loomed in silence. For a long moment, she stared at it, fighting with herself. She could leave the mystery behind, bury it with the past, or she could turn back and uncover the truth that had haunted her family. Her mother's note burned in her mind. Not everyone who entered here was meant to leave. Emily turned back. The door creaked open with little resistance, as if it had been waiting for her return. The house welcomed her like a predator. She retrieved the wooden box she had left behind and carried it into the front room, where light from the cracked windows still lingered. She spread the photographs across the floor. One detail caught her attention, the patients in the photos. Their eyes, hollow, wide, staring at the camera with something between terror and surrender. On the back of one photo was a faint stamp. Ward C, 1965. Emily frowned. Ward? That meant this had been more than just a home. A sanatorium, perhaps, or a secret ward hidden away from the public. But why here? And why her mother? She reached again into the box and found something she had missed. A small brass key wrapped in a piece of cloth. Her heart skipped. She knew immediately it belonged to the cellar. As a child, she had always seen the heavy trap door in the kitchen floor, padlocked and forbidden. Her mother had warned her, "Never go down there, Emily, promise me." Now, with trembling hands, Emily slid the key into the old lock. It clicked open. The wooden trapdoor groaned as she lifted it, and a cold breath of air rose from the darkness below. A narrow staircase led down into the earth, swallowed in shadows. With her phone's flashlight, she began to descend. The cellar was vast, larger than the house itself. Rows of iron beds lined the damp stone walls, each covered in rotting sheets and rusted restraints. The smell was suffocating, a mix of mildew and something older, something that clung to death. Emily's beam of light swept across the room and her stomach tightened. On one wall, in faded red paint, words were scrawled. They never left. Her breath caught in her throat. She spun, half expecting to see someone standing behind her. But there was nothing, only silence, heavy and oppressive. Then she heard it again. Soft, fragile, but unmistakable. "Emily." The whisper echoed through the cellar, carried by voices she could not see. Her light flickered. For a split second, she saw shadows moving between the beds, figures slouched and swaying as though they had never stopped waiting for release. Emily stumbled backward, her flashlight slipping from her hand and rolling across the stone floor. In the beam's trembling glow, she saw them, dozens of pale faces, sunken and hollow, watching her from the dark. She grabbed her light and ran up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind her. Heart pounding, she pressed her back against the kitchen wall. Her body shook violently. The whispers continued, muffled now beneath the floor, but persistent. As though the cellar itself was alive, Emily clutched the photographs to her chest. Her mother's smile in those pictures no longer looked gentle, it looked complicit. The secrets of this house were buried deep but not dead. For the first time, Emily understood. She had not come back home. She had stepped into the grave of the forgotten, and the forgotten wanted her to stay. Emily barely slept that night. She sat in the front room, her suitcase by the door. The photographs scattered on the floor like broken memories. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters. Inside, the house breathed. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old timbers made her skin crawl. But what terrified her most was the whispering. It never stopped. Faint, muffled, seeping through the floorboards from the cellar below. At dawn, exhaustion overcame fear. She drifted into a shallow sleep, only to be jolted awake by the sound of footsteps upstairs. Her heart thudded. She wasn't alone. She grabbed her flashlight and climbed the staircase, each step protesting under her weight. The air grew colder as she reached the landing. Dust floated in the pale light seeping through cracked windows. She followed the sound down the hallway, past closed doors she hadn't dared to open before. One door stood ajar. Emily pushed it open. Inside was a bedroom, untouched by time. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn, the air strangely clean compared to the rest of the house. On the nightstand lay a journal bound in cracked leather. Emily picked it up, her hands trembling as she opened it. The entries were written in her mother's handwriting. February 1965, they delivered the first patients today. Poor souls, abandoned by families who didn't want to see them again. We are told this is for research, for treatment. But I see the fear in their eyes. I hear their screams at night. Emily's throat tightened. She flipped through more pages. June 1966. They say we are healing them, but I know better. The treatments are cruel. Some never wake again. Others change. Their eyes, their voices, they are not the same. I want to leave, but they won't let me. Further on, the handwriting grew shaky, frantic. October 1968. If Emily ever returns here, she must know. She must see what we did. Forgive me, my darling. I only wanted to protect you. But this place, it takes something from all who enter. and it will never give it back. Emily's vision blurred with tears. She pressed the journal to her chest, her breath trembling. Her mother had been part of it, a nurse forced into silence, complicit in horrors she could not stop. A sound broke her thoughts. A soft, dragging noise coming from the hallway. Emily froze, listening. It grew louder, closer. Slowly, she turned her flashlight toward the open doorway. A figure stood there. It was tall, gaunt, its skin as pale as paper. Its eyes were wide and hollow, staring straight at her. Its mouth opened, but no words came, only a low, rasping moan that rattled like broken glass. Emily stumbled back, the journal falling from her hands. The figure stepped into the room, its bare feet leaving dark stains on the wooden floor. The air turned icy. "Emily!" the voice hissed. Not from its mouth, but from everywhere. From the walls, the ceiling, the very air. She ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, her feet barely touching the ground. Behind her, the whispers rose into a chorus. Hundreds of voices overlapping. "Emily, Emily, Emily." She burst through the front door into the daylight, gasping, tears streaming down her face. The village was still a mile away, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The house loomed behind her, its windows watching like eyes, its door gaping like a mouth that had almost swallowed her whole. But as she ran, one truth echoed louder than her heartbeat. The house wasn't haunted by strangers. It was haunted by the people her mother had failed to save. And now it wanted her. Emily did not stop running until she reached the edge of the village. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, but still she pressed on until she found herself collapsing onto the steps of the small, weather-beaten church. The old bell tower loomed above her, its cross dark against the rising sun. Father O'Connell, the village priest, found her there, trembling, clutching the cracked journal against her chest. "My child," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "You shouldn't have gone back to that house." Emily's head snapped up. His words weren't filled with surprise, but with weary certainty, as if he had been expecting her all along. "You know," she whispered, "you knew what happened there." The priest's eyes darkened. "Everyone in this village knows, but no one speaks of it." He led her inside, where the dim light threw stained glass. Windows painted the pews with fractured colors. Emily placed the journal on the altar, her hands shaking. "My mother, she was part of it." "What was it, Father? What did they do in that house?" For a long moment, the priest was silent. Then, in a hushed voice, he said, "It was never just a home. During the war, it became a place of experiments. They called it Ward C doctors, and nurses were sent there to treat soldiers broken by battle. But treatments turned into trials. Trials turned into cruelty, and soon those who entered never returned." Emily's chest tightened. The whispers, the shadows, the pale faces, they weren't ghosts in the ordinary sense. They were remnants of the forgotten, the echoes of lives torn apart beneath her childhood home. "But why my mother?" Emily pressed, tears welling in her eyes. "Why would she stay?" The priest looked at her with sorrow. "Because she had you. They threatened to take you if she ever left. She bore the burden to protect you. She carried their sins in silence so you could live free." Emily's heart shattered. Her mother's warnings, her strange silences, the way she never spoke of the past, all of it made sense now. But before relief could come, the church doors slammed shut. The air grew cold. The whispers returned. "Emily, Emily." Father O'Connell paled. "They followed you here," he whispered. Shadows stretched along the walls, crawling up the stained glass, swallowing the colors. Emily's suitcase toppled, spilling photographs across the church floor. In the fractured light, the faces in the photos seemed to turn, their eyes staring straight at her. Emily clutched the journal, desperate. "What do they want from me?" she cried. The voices rose, a chorus of grief and anger. The answer came not in words, but in a chilling realization that seeped into her bones. They didn't want revenge. They wanted recognition. They wanted to be remembered. Her mother had hidden the truth, buried it in silence, but the house, the patients, refused to be forgotten. And now, it fell to Emily, the daughter of the nurse who had once tended them, to carry their story into the world. The priest's voice trembled. "You must finish what your mother could not. Speak their names, tell their story, or they will never rest and neither will you." Emily looked at the journal in her hands. The final pages were blank, waiting. She understood. This was her inheritance, her curse, and her calling. The whispers began to fade, the shadows receding, as if satisfied that she finally understood. But as the church grew quiet again, Emily knew her journey was only beginning. She would have to return to the house, to the cellar, to uncover every name, every secret, every truth buried beneath those walls. Only then would the dead be free. Only then would she be free. The journal felt heavier in Emily's hands as she walked back toward the edge of the village. The priest's words echoed in her mind. Speak their names, tell their story, or they will never rest. She knew what she had to do. But fear coiled inside her like a living thing. Returning to that house felt like walking into the jaws of death itself. The sun was sinking when she reached the overgrown path again. Shadows draped across the ground like black ribbons. The wind whispering through the trees. Her suitcase dragged behind her, its wheels crunching on gravel. But this time she wasn't running. This time she was going back by choice. The house waited for her. Its windows stared like eyes, its sagging roof a hunched back against the darkening sky. Emily stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning beneath her weight. She pressed her hand to the door. I know why you've kept me here, she whispered. I will finish it. The door swung open without resistance. Inside, the air was cold but still. The whispers did not attack her this time. They surrounded her like a congregation, urging her forward. She carried the journal to the kitchen where the trap door waited. Her hands shook as she unlocked it again. The staircase yawned downward into silence. With her flashlight in one hand and the journal in the other, Emily descended. The cellar was exactly as before, rows of rusted beds, shadows thick as fog, but tonight it felt alive, watching. She laid the journal on a cracked table in the center of the room, its blank pages waiting. I will tell your story, she whispered. All of it. Her flashlight flickered, and in the trembling glow she saw them, the pale faces, the hollow eyes, the silhouettes of men and women who had once been flesh and blood. They stood among the beds, silent, waiting. Emily opened the journal and began to write. She wrote the words from her mother's entries. She wrote what the priest had told her. She described the photographs, the cellar, the horrors she had seen. She wrote about the war, the experiments, the cruelty that had silenced them. As her pen scratched across the page, the air grew lighter. The shadows began to recede one by one. The pale figures lowered their heads as if finally seen. Their whispers softened into sighs, then into silence. When the last page was filled, Emily closed the journal. The cellar was empty. For the first time, truly empty. The weight she hadn't known she carried lifted from her chest. She climbed the stairs slowly, clutching the journal to her chest. In the kitchen, she turned and looked back one last time. The house, once suffocating and alive with torment, was silent now. Still, Emily stepped outside into the night. The wind was calm. The stars shone above. For the first time, the house no longer felt like a predator. It felt like a grave. As she walked away, Emily knew her life had changed forever. She could not return to the hospital, to the ordinary rhythm of her days. She had inherited the duty of remembrance. The world would know what happened here. The forgotten voices would finally be given names, faces, and dignity. And in doing so, she would redeem her mother. The house remained behind her, a hollow shell. But within Emily's journal, the dead finally lived again, not as shadows, not as whispers, but as people whose stories would no longer be buried. Emily didn't look back. For the first time, she didn't have to.